this a food product barrel? Pickles,
Yeah, essentially these are recycled food product barrels.
Where do you get them?
Quarter-inch lip around the edge, so you have something to put your foam on.
Well, currently we're getting these from one of our transition members, and so you can inquire within. I've discovered though that they also sell these at Walmart and deliver for free, so you can have them shipped to the store.
Ah.
I would say leaving the bead on, whether the lid can be pried off or not, also strengthens it at the top where it needs it.
Quarter-inch. Yeah, you don't cut the top out of it, just the center.
Right, so the important part about leaving the center piece in there is for a couple reasons. One is you don't want to lose the rigidity and the strength of the top of the barrel, but also we need something to attach to get the lid on, because that's essentially all we're really looking at with a composting barrel or a bucket to barrel method, is how to essentially affix a toilet seat to the top of a barrel. So basically the next step involved here,
Get rid of the rough edges so you can cut.
there you go, file out the rough edges. If anybody wants to see a little closer or see what's going on, feel free to step forward and feel free to ask questions as we go through specifically. But Scott has prepared for us the diagram. This is available online, and I've included all of our resources on your flyer. To find the parts list, to get all the parts for this, as well as the instructions, the step-by-step instructions. I read those step-by-step instructions, studied them pretty hard for a long time, and I still had questions in my mind, so I think it's important to really be able to see how simple it really is, because I think you get hung up on things, but it really is as simple as a toilet seat on top of a bucket, and anything above that simplicity starts to simply convolute what you're maybe doing, but there are a lot of considerations to be made. One is to make sure that if there's any leakage from the toilet seat, that ends up back into the barrel, and so you will be adding drainage holes on the top of the lid, so that if there's any condensation between the lid and the barrel, that drains back into the barrel and not outside. But this is a 100% sealed system. There are no holes in the barrel, doesn't leach out into the ground.
Now, what if you like your edge nice and rough?
You're taking a risk.
Get out of here.
Just heard a song.
So the composting method, I'm going to give you just a quick brush over, and that is, I've been using coconut core, which is just the coconut husk material. Any carbon-based material can be used, but I'm simply using what's called the cat litter method. That is, bury it. That's all you have to do, is cover it up and bury it. If you cover it up and bury it with enough material that it doesn't smell.
How about coffee grounds? If you have some extra acidity there, that might help.
Well, because it's a composter, you can actually add other things in there and it wouldn't be a very big deal. Especially considering the aging process, it's just less digested than the other food material you're putting in. So, one of the things we talk about is when you read the Human Manure Handbook is sometimes proportions are important. So one of the things I would recommend about using a compost toilet is to avoid urinating them if at all possible. In the water group, we're kind of naturalists. We say, just pee on a tree. It's a really easy thing to do. And
For a guy.
Trees don't like that much either.
Sure they do.
Well, they do. Typically, the rule of thumb is you need to water it down by 10 times the volume in water. And that's an important part of reducing it to safe levels so that you're not creating a toxic sewage situation. We also want to avoid putting out too much moisture. Joey, knock it off. We also want to avoid putting too much moisture in the barrel. So it's simply a matter of it will accommodate as a necessity that you will do both of your actions when you're there. But in the water group, we often talked about the fact that avoiding the flush is really important. If you need to build an outhouse, a screen to use your outdoor places, it's essentially what we're going to do for the composting toilet as well. So another method for urination is using a bale of hay and simply sticking a funnel in it. The funnel will take the urine to the center of hay. The urine will provide the moisture to the bale of hay that it needs to rot, and it'll basically collapse in on itself. At which time your bale of hay collapses, it's time to discard the bale of hay, in which time it can be added as a mulch, topsoil, swale material. There's a lot of things you can do with it. I have not yet experimented on that yet, but might be coming soon.
It was my thought that urine is like acidic, basically, from human beings and other animals, actually. Should you add some lime to help counter that, or does it make any difference?
It does make a difference, and that often depends on how your compost is progressing. And we'll get into that just a little bit later, but I wanted to keep it kind of simple for today's discussion. And that is, for one reason, if you're no good at composting and you really want to waste all that energy you collected, you can take a full barrel and dump it in your Burtec waste and have it taken away with your municipal garbage. It's logically about the same as throwing a diaper away without all the plastic. So it would be a travesty because you're wasting a lot of energy that you could be introducing back into your environment instead of continuing the anaerobic cycle that exists at the waste dump. How are we doing over there? So he's going to start.
What you want to do is find your center point on a 2x2 piece of wood.
So Home
3/4
Depot
inch.
sells the 2x2 pieces already cut out in 2x2, so you don't have to worry about sawing out your own piece, just so you know.
3/4 inch, whatever nice piece of wood you want to get. Find your center point, and that's where you start working. For the center of your toilet seat, you want to go from the bottom 8.5 inches up. Make a mark there.
Does that depend on the size of the toilet seat?
Well, the diameter is.
Well, you start the diameter.
So another, go ahead.
Are you keeping the urine and the poop separate?
No. In the method I'm using, it's all going in together. I'm just going to avoid urinating into it as much as possible because kind of the whole method here is drying it out and trying to create a good compost, and too much urine will foul that process. Tim here has developed on his a urine diversion system.
Yeah, there's a insert you can buy. It's made from Sweden. You can find it online. And what it does, it just fits under the toilet seat, and it has the way it's set up is when you're sitting on it, either female or male, of course, both, it will divert the urine into a collection container that you can put anywhere. In my case, I just worked it into a gray water system, and so it diluted it automatically into the trees. It keeps all the urine out of the composting, which makes the whole process a little easier and a little less, caustic to deal with.
That's what mine in the city is. It's urine diverse, so it's completely separate. You take the urine out.
Not to get too personal, what do you do with the urine at that point?
Well, a couple of things. You can either, like you said, dilute it with the 10-part thing, so you can use it as fertilizer, but it takes a lot of water. So a lot of times what I just do is I'll just throw it down the toilet, and so it's, you use a gallon of water to flush, a whole thing instead of just one pee. So that's what I usually do, and then the number 2 becomes, the compost, and it goes into an aging system.
Right. I find that the general rule of thumb, both with the composting toilet and with the urine, for instance, if you're urinating on a tree, the plant water requirement for that tree is much larger than the dilution rate for the urine. And so if you're watering that tree properly, it shouldn't ever smell of urine. It should never be something that you smell. So if you're smelling it, you're probably doing it wrong. And the same is true with the composting toilet, because if it smelled, no one would do it. What really got me curious with the composting toilet was the fact that RVers were going through and taking out their blackwater systems because they smell and they're hard to maintain, they require lots of work, and you're getting a little too intimate with your
And you put
with your
in
duty.
the perfume chemicals.
And chemicals, and you're driving down the road, and it back washes the air through your vehicle, and it just creates that smell. So when people figured out that composting toilets don't smell or have a highly reduced smell, pretty much limited to your activity time when you're creating the smell. Other than that, once it's in the barrel, it gets buried. So when I started, I added about 4 or 5 inches of the coconut char to the bottom. And I'll, when we go back and go through the grand tour, I'll show you the coconut char and how I prepared it. But so I didn't want to end up having to clean up the bottom of the barrel or deal with that. You want to make sure there's plenty of material in your barrel to start with. But once you have that material down, you get started. And all you have to do is, again, in the kitty litter method, bury it. If you're burying it with enough material, it won't smell. If it smells, then bury it with more material. It's one of those things that really doesn't hurt to put too much carbon material in the barrel. It's just going to be reintroduced back into your environment. So other than that, you probably want to be conservative because we're in the desert. It's hard to find carbon-based materials that are a waste byproduct. And if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear them. I like the idea of the coconut char because it is an excess product from the tropics, and it's very lightweight and easy to ship. All you have to do is add water to reconstitute it. But Tim here's got other methods.
One of the best carbon sources I found out here is mulberry trees. So many people have these non-pretty mulberry trees. When they drop all their leaves, if you just collect them all up, put them in a big hefty bag, and just do a quick Irish jig on the bag, it turns into almost like a powder. And it really breaks down really fast with this composting method. So a lot faster than sawdust and things like that. So there's mulberry trees everywhere. If you don't have one, I'm sure you have a neighbor that'd be glad for you to come over and pick up all the leaves when they drop.
Do we have any questions so far?
Just that it's the urine that makes it stink.
Right.
So if you can get the urine as much out of the other, the poo actually, once you cover it, it's almost immediate. The smell goes away. And the more it hydrates, the more it gets. We can't smell it at all.
So,
I have friends that use peat. Is that a good?
yes, peat, moss, wood shavings. The one warning on wood shavings is that if you're using treated wood shavings, that's a problem. It'll kill off the bio material that we're relying on to compost. The other thing is a lot of wood is dehydrated, and so it needs to be rehydrated in order to be that useful. And so it's just something you need to keep in mind. Fresh wood shavings are the best.
I was kind of thinking, what Chinaberry tree doesn't overproduce the fruit from
Right.
the ground that you have to rake up? Couldn't that work?
Well, just on a personal opinion, if you have a Chinaberry tree, please cut it down. It's an invasive species
I
in the
know
desert. So,
And what is the problem with Chinaberry in that it's an invasive species, and
Yeah.
beyond the fact that it's non-native?
it's not native, but it's a water-intensive tree, so it's essentially stealing water from the environment around it and displacing native trees. But I believe there are other reasons. There are a lot of environmentally sensitive areas where they spend a ton of time and energy trying to get Chinaberries out, and probably because of the berries. They're easily reproduced out there in the desert.
Tim gave a talk on the 6 trees that are best out here. Was it Chinaberry? one?
6 plants.
Chinaberry.
So if you
I use Chinaberries for
the
opposite.
tamarisk or eucalyptus or things like that, you can't use.
If you need like
They're
old
so
or
gross.
just the one really strong.
I imagine.
No, I'm not talking about planting them. I'm talking about in the compost.
Yeah, I imagine one of the problems with eucalyptus is it does have anaerobic properties to it. And so it'd have those same properties in your compost, and you're trying to maintain as much of a bio
Right.
living
Same thing with
system.
tamarisk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but never hurts to experiment. It might be something you add in. It might be something where maybe you put it on the bottom instead of using the material you paid for. I'm cheap, so as you'll find out. Is there any other questions so far? How are we doing on the build?
Getting there.
All right, so I'm ready for the grand tour to show you our the commode I built back here. Actually, this guy built it.
Whose book were you referring to?
The book
Yeah.
This one's called the Humanure Handbook. It's by Joseph Jenkins. I do have the book listed in my references on the flyer here.
I like that about your website is you have so many links locally, especially.
There was another gentleman who brought a book.
Holy shit.
It's called Holy Shit.
Managing manure to save mankind.
Managing manure to save mankind, which gives us, a pretty good point here. The important reasons on why composting toilets for me started with the water group, and that is there's no way we should be using water in the desert to be flushing toilets. In places like South Africa, where they're contemplating day zero, which is the day that their water faucets are going to run out because they don't have enough water, they no longer have the choice of using fresh water in their toilets. And now that they've made that psychological jump, they all say that they would never again consider using drinkable water to flush in your toilets. It's an affront to man, I think.
Where is that?
In South Africa, Cape Town specifically. So it is the first of 10 cities in the world that are over 1 million people that are expected to run out of water in the next few years. The Colorado River is expected to hit its drought levels this year, I think, and they didn't get nearly as much snowpack in the Rockies as we did in California, and we didn't get nearly as much in California as we need. So as you can imagine, the Colorado River Project, which provides water to 5 states, is going to have huge impacts because those aren't state restrictions, those are federal restrictions, and those federal restrictions will include this area specifically because even though we're considered part of the Colorado River Basin. So
I was recently up at Big Bear Lake looking to the lake.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you big?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's take a few minutes and take a look at the drawing while he's putting this together, because that's basically the magic of